Good morning. Thank you all for giving a morning here. I know you get credit for it, but thank you anyway. You're having a fundraiser talk to you. I mean, who goes up to be a fundraiser, right? What a crazy idea. Reminds me of the story of these three guys going on a trip. So there's a fundraiser, and he has a friend from India and a friend from Israel, right? And he's taking them on a trip in the United States to see towns and to learn about how generous Americans are. And every place he goes, he points to generosity, right? Well, they get up to Vermont, and it's the kind of the farm country up there, and it's dark at night, and the car breaks down. No cell service, so they have to walk to the house that's nearby. It's a farmhouse. And the farmer, sure enough, welcomes them. You know, come on in, boys. We got some food. We'll fix your car tomorrow. They have a lovely evening together. Finally, they get to the end of the evening, and the farmer says, well, I've got room for two of you in the house, but one of you is going to have to stay in the barn tonight. So the three guests look at each other, and the gentleman from India says, no problem. So they say, good night, goes off. A couple minutes later, there's a knock at the door. It's a guy from India, and he says, there's a cow out in the barn. My religious observance, I cannot be in the barn. I'm sorry, I cannot sleep in the barn tonight. So, no problem. So the fundraiser and the gentleman from Israel look at each other. The gentleman from Israel says, I'll go. So they say goodnight. He heads off. A couple minutes later, there's a knock on the door. It's the gentleman from Israel. He says, I have a problem. There's a pig in the barn. Unclean animals, I can't. So the fundraiser says, oh, no problem, I'll go in there. I say, good night, goes off. They shut the door. A couple minutes later, there's a knock on the door, and there stand the cow and the pig. Think about it, it's just morning, okay? Okay. We're going to look at a familiar passage this morning, and when we do, I felt it would be useful to perhaps tap into the resources of a technologically inclined and sensory-aware community. And so we're going to take a very familiar story about a night sail that Jesus and his disciples take. But we're going to add two things. We're going to add a little bit of a soundtrack, and we're going to add special effects. So I'm going to split the room here in two. You all are going to be my soundtrack. You all are going to provide special effects, okay? So let's start with the soundtrack, okay? What we're going to need is we're going to need you all to sort of gently be able to sing this at the beginning of one of the sections. It's really easy. Just sit right down and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. Got the idea? The weather started getting rough. The tiny ship was tossed. If not for the courage of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. The minnow would be lost. Marvelous. You guys did great. Obviously, you can tell Bill is an accomplice on this, so it's going to be kind of fun here, okay? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to be singing this as the entr'acte to one of the sections in our story, all right? But there's another song I'm going to need you to sing. It's a little different. Some of you may know this one, okay? This is going to be a little bit later, okay, so hold on to this. You'll get your turn. Just hang on, okay? You guys chose the right side, right? Right, okay. It's okay. It gets worse. All righty. So, you know how it begins. Yep. They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together ooky, the Addams Family. Da-da-da-dum, 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 da-da-da-dum. You got it? Okay, good. Okay, so that's going to be in the second part of our three-part story. Now, I haven't left you guys out quite yet, okay? I'm going to have to take this black. If you can just take this black, because we don't want them watching that. Just this slide, if we can take, thank you, gentlemen. Now, you all have sound effects. You have 3 sound effects that I'm going to need, okay? At the right cue in the story, I want to hear wind and waves, all right? Can you all do wind and waves? It's pretty good, pretty good. Now, if you want to make it less high and shrill, then you put your hands over it and you kind of do. Okay, yeah. Anybody good at thunder or lightning? Okay, you can add that too. Okay, it won't be for... Okay, that's all right. The second one is going to be a little bit, well, it's maybe a little bit more challenging. And if you had to, you can pull on a technical effect, which is in your pocket. I know it's in your pocket. If you go to the app that says Creepy Halloween Sounds, all right, it's a free app, and you might choose to do that. But if you don't choose to do that, I'm going to need sound effects, all right, that are kind of creepy, spooky sound effects. Any of you have any creepy, spooky sound effects you can do? That kind of thing? Okay. The trick is, with the creepy, spooky sound effects, you guys have to cut off at the right moment. Same is true also with the wind, okay? You'll hear why in a second. All right, that's the second sound effect, all right? There's a last sound effect, though, that you'll need to do, okay? Trust me on this. Pigs. Okay. That's nice. When you want to try it, the high version is suey. Can you do suey? That's nice, that's nice, that's nice, that's right. And then if you add a gut roll, okay? Can you do that? All right. So I'm going to bring this all together in a story, in a three-part story. You can guess what the story is. And oh, by the way, those of you who are doing that pig sound effect, you're going to have to take it aerial, if you know what I mean. All right? And those of you who don't, you'll find out in a minute. Okay. All right. Slide back on again. So I think we're about ready to begin our little episode here. All right? Just sit back, and you... Very nice. You feeling it? A little bit creepy, huh? The weather started getting rough. Tiny triplets lost. Nice. The minnow would be lost. The evening came, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." And so they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon, a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Come on, you can do this. Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat, and his head was on a cushion. The disciples woke up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care what's going to happen? We're going to drown." Keep going. Jesus woke, he rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, it was really good, "Silence, be still." Or as Gandalf would say, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm, and they asked, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The disciples, they were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" Oh. This'll be fun. That even the wind and the waves obey him. Let's see if it works still, huh? Otherwise, I'm captive to the desk. All righty. There, that wasn't so bad, right? So let's give a little context to this. Jesus has been preaching that whole day on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, all right? And he's been sitting in a boat, and he's been talking in parables. He's been using a lot of farm metaphors, too, about seed and ground and, stuff growing and fertile soil. And he finally has had a full day, and he says, "Enough. Let's go sailing from Capernaum. We're going to go about 9 miles across the Sea of Galilee." And as the text said, it was evening. So he's going on a kind of a nice evening sail. A fun thing to do in the springtime, summertime, is to go to Gloucester, and they have these evening sunset sails. You can imagine. Wow, what fun. How relaxing after a full day of preaching, sitting in a boat. Wouldn't it be kind of just pleasant? Yeah. Thank you, Bill. But something strange happens, right? They get partway across the lake, and this storm whips up. It's now dark, and there's a storm. In fact, it's a pretty bad storm. It's so bad that, well, it feels like this to the disciples, right? These are people, half of whom are sailors. And Jesus, who's just so knocked out, isn't there to respond. And they're terrified. What's more, the direction that he has them heading is to a place called the Decapolis. It's not Greek. It's Roman-controlled. It's kind of foreign territory. And they are now in the midst of an evening sail. They're wet. It's taking way too long. And finally, when it lands, it's 3 in the morning. This was not the pleasure cruise they were thinking. I don't know about you all, but some of you will find a point in your life when the thing that you thought you prepared for, God had a different plan. You thought you were preparing to do something, but he said, I want you to get in the boat with me. I want you to take a trip, and I'm not going to tell you how it's going to turn out. I had one of those experiences. By the time I was 34, I'd been working at Stanford for a long time, raising money for a university, but I sensed that maybe God was calling me into some form of ministry. So, being the master of timing with a barely 1-year-old baby, sold our home and moved and went to seminary in Southern California. What craziness is that? And we thought it would be all goodness and light. But within the first week, the following happened. The moving van arrived in Pasadena, and the people who were in the house hadn't moved out yet. In fact, our worldly possessions went for a 5-day tour around Southern California in the moving van until the house was ready. And when we finally came to move in, we helped the former owners take the stuff out and clean the house we were moving into. 3 days later, the giant jacaranda tree in the backyard that we thought we had bought crashed down in a Santa Ana wind, taking out the back of the house. We discovered later that the neighbor next door, there had been a shooting. And then finally, when I was away, Jeannie saw that there was a little group of people who were all wearing black hoods and walking around a candle. And the old neighbor next door said, it's probably Reader's Theater, but it could be a coven. Welcome to seminary. So my first point is, when you go with Jesus and you get in the boat, you sign up for being with Jesus. And sometimes he takes control and things happen. All righty. Part 2. You guys ready? Oh, you can all do it. They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together rookie, the Addams Family. Da-da-da-dum, 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 da-da-da-dum. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. And Jesus climbed out of the boat, and a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains with his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the brutal caves, the burial in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp objects. Can I have a sound effect, please? This is the guy that we're meeting. This is the guy that we're meeting, okay? It's nighttime. This is not the welcoming committee you thought, Jesus and company. No, this is who is welcoming you. He lives in the tombs. The community has figured it was a better idea to tie him up and keep him isolated, keep him out of harm's way. You see, they didn't have a place for him and a use for him. But it turns out that trip was going to be all about this crazy man. God had a plan for his disciples to get in the boat. It involved landing on another shore. And if you know God's heart is always about seeking to save the lost. Yeah, there's other stuff that's always going on, but God's heart is on the sparrow, and he watches me. You see, Jesus knew the man that he was going to go after. Can I have a dark slide here? After I'd been to seminary, I had the opportunity to work in prison ministry. And working in prison ministry brings you to a point of seeing mostly men, but often women, who are at the end of their line. And what was a guy who'd been working at Stanford and had just come out of seminary doing here with prisoners, ex-prisoners, gang members, and others? But simply holding forth the gospel I knew. I had a man who'd come to me and approached me about he was going to go to prison. And he said, "I'd like to volunteer for your ministry." I said, "That's a nice idea." He says, "Yeah, I'm about to go in for federal indictment." "Oh, and my caseworker said maybe you would get some good time from the judge if you volunteered for a prison ministry." That's a noble motive. So I said, "Sure, why not?" And I brought him to our Bible study group at the local church. This man had no heart for the Lord yet, but God wasn't done with him. We stayed with him through the indictment, through the federal trial, through the sentencing, and we stayed with him all the way to the assignment at Allenwood Prison. It's nothing quite like you bringing your little kids and your wife up for prison visits. My daughter got to take the brown bear from grade school that weekend, and as was the custom in her school, with the brown bear, you would write a little diary entry of where the brown bear went over that weekend. You can imagine the reaction of the fourth grade teacher when Brown Bear came back, and the entry for Brown Bear from Allegra Edwards was, "Went to prison, had a lovely time with the other inmates." So my second step is, you will meet Jesus in his most distressing disguises when you step in the boat. I'll say it again. You'll meet Jesus in his most distressing disguises when you step in the boat. It's not that prisoner who eventually came to the Lord. It's Jesus. When I was hungry, thirsty, naked, sick in prison, and you didn't do it for the least of these, you didn't do it for me. When did we see you? It was that prisoner at Allenwood. It was that person on the street. It was that someone who seems so unlovely. "Do it unto me," as the poem says. So you get in the boat and go places you've never been. You meet people you never thought you'd meet, but those people, it turns out, surprise, surprise, are Jesus. But then he has some more work to do. And in this man's particular case, before the healing has to begin, further hurt needs to take place. We pick up our story. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Or maybe as Smeagol would say, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" "In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." And the evil spirits begged him, and again, not to send them some distant place. "My Christianity didn't prepare me for this. I was raised a Catholic. I became a Presbyterian. I was not ready for this." We didn't talk about it in seminary, but it's real. So when you're a child, you think like a child. You reason like a child. But when you grow up, you put away childish things. And there are spirits. There are demons. Genesis 3 talks about the conflict that takes place at the beginning between the woman and her seed and the serpent and his. Revelation, the serpent is again described with all of his glory. Jude, there's a spiritual struggle going on in the heavenlies and here in this world. As you know, in Ephesians 6, our striving isn't against flesh and blood, is it? Daniel, you see that there's a spirit holding back Persia. And in Ezekiel 28, the description of how Satan came to his sorry situation is there for all of us to see. He who was brilliant made low because of his pride. Scripture is full of the understanding that there is a spiritual reality. In the case of this particular man, these spirits knew exactly who they were meeting. He had a plan for them, ultimate defeat. So they asked him, before the end comes, can we not go someplace else? And they asked for a quick departure. And that quick departure is going to transform that man from a before picture to an after. No, from an after picture to a before. It's going to change that man. Continue the story. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. Send us into the pigs, the spirits begged. Let us enter them. So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs. Ready, pigs? And the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. Can I hear flying pigs, please? Yeah, not bad, not bad. First case of swine flu, right? Yeah? Okay. What? It was a costly gift, wasn't it? See, the herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside and spread the news as they ran. The people rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, and he was sitting there, fully clothed and perfectly sane. And they were all afraid. And those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs, and the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. Kind of a surprising episode, don't you think? But then maybe not. It had happened before in a different way. You see, there were also people keeping watch over animals at night. When it happened in Bethlehem, they were shepherds. They were watching over sheep. The swineherds were looking over pigs. Sheep, as you know, are the Passover animal for sacrifice, while the pig is the sacrificial animal of the Romans. There was the sound of angels at Jesus' birth, but there was the sound of demons at the new birth of the man who now was clothed and in his right mind. There was a death of innocence when Jesus came into the world, and there was also death of pigs when the new man got his new life. But in Jesus' case, there was joy shared when he was born, but fear in the Decapolis when this man clothed in his right mind was there. Jesus paid a huge price to be with us, to be Emmanuel and God with us. He paid 2,000 pigs to have one crazy man clothed and in his right mind. As a fundraiser, I have been aware of the change in the economy, of what God is willing to spend to have one person brought near and dear to him. It's a small shadow of what a donor is willing to do to bring one young man or one young woman to the next step in their education. But it has the same heart, a heart of generosity and belief in what could be. Let's finish our story. As Jesus was getting in the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus said, "No. Go home to your family and tell them everything that the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region, and he began to proclaim the great things that Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. Friends, you have a choice now and as you step out of Gordon to get into Jesus' boat. When you do, you'll be invited to see him and meet him in some scary disguises. You will also see that at Jesus' heart, his eye is on bringing that which was lost and having it come home and be found. And Jesus is not embarrassed to pay a handsome price to have anyone clothed and in his right mind. Some of you, perhaps one of you in this room, feels like that crazy man. perhaps one of you in this room needs to be set free and needs to know that his eye is on you. You know, he loves us, he loves you so much that he would do that for you, because he did it for a crazy man who lived in the tombs a long time ago. I'm going to ask you to do something now. We're going to gently sing two songs, but we're changing the song with different words. We're going to sing Gilligan's Island, but the words of Amazing Grace. We're going to do it gently. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. Again. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. But you know what? There is a good news to this. We're going to take that same amazing grace words, but we're going to put them to that Christmas song, Joy to the World, because that is the good news. That is the news for us today. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed, the hour I first believed, the hour I first believed. Let's bow our heads and commit the remainder of our day to the Lord's care. Father, you invite us to get in your boat. You invite us to meet you in a distressing disguise. You've already paid the fare. You've been extravagant. And you have a purpose and plan for, yes, even us. Father, as we enter into this day, we are reminded that we will see people today where there's a little risk, perhaps a little danger. But may we be people who would rather see you and not worry about the danger. May we be people who will say yes, people who will get in your boat to be with you. We thank you for this morning. To you be all the honor and glory, and all God's people said.